Welcome to video diary number 5. We've come to Sybaris on the south coast of Italy. Sybaris was a very early colony founded in the 8th century BC and would become proverbially famous for its wealth and luxurious living. And obviously we will want to do due diligence in our research.
There was no difficulty procuring the necessary quantity of wine to do due diligence, just some awkwardness transferring the purchase to our bed and breakfast. Actually, this pithos was in fact from the later Roman era, and as we know, they certainly knew how to party.
The colonies, or cities, or polis as the Greeks called them, polis is the plural, polis the singular, were for the most part separate political entities. On the plus side, that meant they had a great degree of independent self-government, but the downside was there was a greater chance of their falling out. We've already seen the appetite for argument that the Greeks had. Well, the difference between an argument and a full-on spat is only a matter of degree. Sybaris had long-running sores with its neighbour, Crotone, or Crotona, as it was known in Latin. And in the 5th century BC, Crotona's aggression caused the people of Sybaris to call in the help of some settlers from Athens. But this partnership didn't last. The Athenians decided to found a separate colony, partly on the site of Sybaris and partly next to it, called Thurii in its Romanized form, Thurioi in Greek. Sybaris itself had been reduced to virtually nothing by the Crotonians.
And here's a word link for you. The word for city, polis, and citizen, polites. You can probably see the English words derived from those.
One of the first colonists here from Athens, here in Thurii, was the historian Herodotos, who spent his latter years here after a lifetime of travels. Herodotos is considered the first of the classical historians, an important source for the Persian Wars for the first part of the 5th century BC and earlier. He was a great traveller and clearly a great listener, lapping up stories and anecdotes from all around the known world. I imagine him here, sitting under an olive tree, perhaps not in the rain, with a new generation of listeners enthralled with his wonderful tales.
Arrian was the most distinguished musician of his time. He once sailed to Italy and Sicily, where he performed with great success and earned a good deal of money. When his tour was done, he chose a Corinthian ship to take him back to Corinth. The crew, however, when the ship was at sea, hatched a plot to throw him overboard and steal his money. Arrian begged them to spare his life and just take his money, but the sailors refused. And so, as a last resort, he asked if he could put on his singing robes and give them a song. The sailors were delighted to hear the world's greatest singer and gathered on deck. Arrian put on his costume, stood up, and played and sang a lively tune. Then he leapt into the sea. The ship sailed on to Corinth, but Arrian was saved by a dolphin, who carried him over the waves to the shore. And once on dry land, he made his way, still in full costume, to Corinth, where he told the whole story. Now, Periander, the tyrant of Corinth, was not too ready to believe him. And when the ship returned, he called in the crew to ask them if they had seen Arrian. "Oh, yes," they said. "For sure. Oh, yes. We left him in good spirits in Tarentum in Italy." But then Arrian appeared, and their lie was plain for all to see.
Just over a century later, a new conflict arose, this time between Thurii and the Greek colony Taras, or Tarentum, as it was known in Latin. Now, Tarentum called in the help of Pyrrhus, the king of Epirus, across the sea in Greece. And the Thurians, not to be outdone, enlisted the services of a power to the north, the Romans.
By the beginning of the 3rd century BC, Rome was the dominant city in the Italian peninsula. The conflict between Pyrrhus and the Romans ended more or less in a draw. Pyrrhus did win a couple of engagements, but as he is said to have observed, and has since become proverbial, any more of these victories and I'll have no soldiers left at all.
Well, we've come down the coast to Crotona, or Croton as it was in Greek. This is the long-standing enemy of Sybaris. And Crotona too was probably founded in the 8th century BC. I still can't get over how early that is. The period more or less when Homer's poems were being written down and Romulus and Remus were still in shorts. Actually, there's a legend about Numa, who was the king of Rome after Romulus. Now, he visited Crotona to listen to the teachings of its famous philosopher, Pythagoras. Well, I came across Pythagoras at school when I was trying to work out the lengths of the sides of right-angled triangles. But in fact, we know very little about him. And this goes for others too. One of the reasons Magna Graecia slips below our radar is that very little of what the poets, philosophers and others have written has survived. So what do we know about him with any certainty? He probably lived in the 6th century BC, which makes the squaring up of the Numa legend a little bit tricky chronologically. He was born in Samos, the island off the coast of Asia Minor, and he moved to Crotona about the age of 40. Now, the poet Ovid picks up on the Numa story, and he has Pythagoras urging people not to eat meat. "Look," says Pythagoras, "you have fruits of the earth. You have apples, grapes, vegetables, milk, honey. What else do you need?"
Quantum scelus est in viscera condi, ingestoque auidum pinguescere corpora corpus, alteriusque animantis vivere leto.
Killing animals in self-defense, that's one thing, but to eat them? Pigs may be culled because they eat our plants, and goats browse grapevines, yes. But what of you, poor sheep, who do nothing but give us milk and wool? Or oxen who devote your service to ploughing our land? And people, must you use the excuse of religious duty of sacrifice to the gods? That only makes the immortals partners in our crimes.
That more or less is what Ovid has Pythagoras say, and I'm sure it will strike a chord with many. So we may not know a lot about Pythagoras, but one thing we do know, he was highly thought of by later philosophers, not least Plato. Pythagoras is behind the theory of the transmigration of souls. In other words, when our lives are done, our souls hop off and hang around for a while, waiting for another body to inhabit. Now, Virgil makes use of this theory in his Aeneid, when Aeneas visits the underworld and his father shows him the souls of Romans to come. And it has obvious appeal to Ovid, given the themes of change and renewal in his Metamorphoses.
Omnia mutantur, nihil interit, errat et illinc uc venit inc illucet, quos libet occupat artus spiritus, eque ferris human in corpora transit, inque ferras noster, nec tempore deperit ullo.
Well, with thanks to Llewellyn Morgan for those two readings from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Now, Ovid passes on Pythagoras' advice, or his warning really, that the souls of humans pass into animals and the souls of animals into humans. Well, the thing is, if you eat meat, then you just don't know who's going to be on the menu, do you? I think I'm going to go for the vegetarian ravioli. It's buonissimo. Buon appetito.
This is the plate of grilled vegetables that came with my ravioli. You know, Ovid has people changing not just into animals, but also into plants and trees and water and stone and all sorts. Look at this plate of veg. I'm sure I recognise somebody. Maybe not. Well, I survived it, but not so much as survived in the way of buildings and temples at these colonies. There's some attractive pottery recovered at Sybaris from as early as the 2nd millennium BC, before the colony was founded, and this from a woman's tomb in the 8th century, not long after. There are some elegant vessels too from Thurii, but the only examples of black figure or red figure painted pottery was at Crotona.
So, next week, for us, it's Scylla and Charybdis. And in the meantime, be careful what you eat.